It's the small details that you miss on the
Yeah,
live
yeah,
shows, like
yeah. Oh,
hitting the
there we
live
go.
button.
Oh, we are live now.
Yes, we are.
I can't believe all that important information that these people missed because you
I
forgot
know.
to hit the go live button.
I know. That was probably the most profound thing you've ever said. I have ever heard you say come out of your mouth.
Yeah, well,
And now we will never know because somebody didn't hit the go live. I mean, in fairness,
yeah,
2 people did not hit the go live button.
yeah,
I just want to say that nobody hit it. I'm
yeah.
not saying everyone was responsible to do it, but I'm just saying that nobody hit the live button. Is all I'm going to
I
say.
should have done it because I kept wondering why isn't the time clock moving?
Yep. All right. So, yeah, well, welcome.
Yes.
Good
Good
afternoon
morning.
again.
Okay.
We don't have to have the whole same conversation.
No,
again.
no. I think we should jump right in
All right. Yeah.
before we lose the 27 people that are listening to us today.
So we are talking. We are not talking OPEC today. I did not read enough on that. IRS is Friday. We'll be talking about the IRS rules. So I just see Mark in here.
Yes.
Talking about it. It takes a minute to get some of the shows together, so give me some time. We are talking East versus West today. America and Japan versus Russia and China.
Yes.
And I know that's sort of East and West versus East, but because Japan is decidedly not in the West.
You know, and I keep thinking to myself, is Tom Cruise going to be involved in this at all? Is this a future Mission Impossible movie?
The future of EVs decided by Ethan Hunt. Yeah.
Yes. Could that be the case? And I believe it might be.
Yeah. I mean, hey, we're talking about world economics here. And,
yes.
You know, the only thing that I think is going to affect economies more would be AI, which is a whole nother conversation. But, you know, this is shifting economies. This is shifting geopolitics, everything else. So, you know, let's not pretend that the Ethan Hunts of the world won't be involved somewhere along the lines in this. Saying that, I'm sure that's happening. So the U.S. and Japan have just recently reached a deal to secure supplies on critical minerals, right? Because right now, where most of the lithium mines are in China, even though the most lithium is not, but the mines are in China. And then Russia has cobalt, nickel, and helium, but that's irrelevant.
Yes.
So, you know, most of the minerals that are mined right now come from China and Russia, who are teaming up together. And then, so the U.S. has sort of made a pact with Japan to try to get that out. But I know Igor posted back on the community for today's video in some very good points about, you know, Africa and South America and, you know, sort of their leanings towards partnerships with Russia and China over the U.S. and Japan. And so, you know, sort of want to talk about, you know, what are those implications that are coming? This is a debate style show, so we can get into politics here a little more. Like, you know, I think this has the potential to be one of the largest shifts in geopolitics that we've probably seen since the end of the Cold War.
I would tend to agree with that. I mean, it is, you know, when we sort of look at China and Russia, you know, as opposed to the United States and Japan, it's usually framed in good versus evil. You know, the United States and Japan were good, and China and Russia are evil. They just want to take over the world, and you know,
I think we're both old enough to remember when Japan was the bad guy.
Well,
And
I heard
as
about that. There was a war or something.
yeah, I think
I just remember. I remember every December 7th, a thing called Pearl Harbor Day.
yeah,
Okay, and I'm pretty sure that's when the Japanese um, flew and bombed Pearl Harbor, and decided to invade the United States in a sense. Um, and yet today, we're the best of allies. So
yeah.
stuff
That
can
that
change.
happened so fast. Like that's what has always amazed me is what the war ended in 45, right?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah, by 1952, the Japanese were clamoring for American music and jeans and products, and we were over there helping. I was just like, that was fast. That was really, really fast that switch happened. I've always been fascinated by that. Obviously, before my time,
Yes.
but uh, reading through all that, it was fascinating. And I remember, I grew up in the '80s, like a lot of our viewers here, based on the TV shows we all watched. I grew
Yes.
up at the same time, um, and I remember Russia being, you know, the bad guy, and China was nothing. Like, yeah, China, they're, and there was this sort of thing, and then, the wall fell, and it's like, oh, we have to incorporate everyone, and you find out a lot of. I mean, I personally found out a lot of the things that I was taught in the early '80s about Russia. Yeah, the people weren't like that at all. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, that's not right, huh? Okay. Um, and I think that hasn't changed much. I think a lot of what we talk about in the media and stuff is the big scary. Yes, there are shifts going on. There's always shifts going on. As Igor says, the U.S. dollar sort of people are working to make the U.S. dollar not the standard around the world.
They're trying. I don't know that
Yeah,
they'll ever really succeed at that.
I know we are as a country not unaware that is trying to happen, and we sort of have the best of the best government wise. What that means,
Hmm.
um, but government wise, we have the best of the best sort of working to counter that. So I agree. I don't know if it will ever happen, but there's definitely a movement out there to make that happen. But I do believe the Japanese tried that as well way back when. I think lots of people tried it. Of course, they they would all like the U.S. to not have the influence that they do. Um, but I think in these terms, these are sort of where things get really shaken out. Can the U.S. and Japan get together and produce enough minerals? Can they produce enough battery chemistry changes? A lot of the Tesla's new stuff doesn't use cobalt at all. So, there's one mineral we can sort of check off. Okay, well, we don't need that. So, how does this play out in the long term, or not in the long term, in the medium term, right? What do you think in the medium term?
Well, I think I might be having some fiber optic issues at the moment.
Yeah,
Um,
I think so too. I
yeah,
think so too. I can kind of hear you, but at least your picture froze in a really nice place, and it wasn't a weird look.
well, I'm thankful for that.
Yeah,
Um, I would think in the short term that um, an alliance between our country and Japan, when it comes to automotive, it is probably going to be one of the strongest alliances out there. And I would think it would have a sizable impact on what happens in the automotive industry, especially for EVs. Um,
doesn't everyone want this? By the way, China wants to be the economic and military superpower of the world. Doesn't every country?
well, no, I don't think every country does, because I think there's very few countries that really think of themselves as being in a position to do that. Um, I think China wants to. I believe at a certain point in time Russia wanted to. Um, and I think Russia realizes they can't and they won't. But I don't think China's convinced that they can't. and they won't. And they're a large enough country, an economic power, to the point where they ultimately they could be, because so much of what is manufactured in this world is manufactured in China. They realized many years ago that if they were building everything for everybody else's economies, that ultimately they could end up being the major economy in the world.
Well, and again, I go back just to my childhood and my lifetime because that's what I know the most.
Sure.
Although I do read a lot of history, so I know before my lifetime. But in my lifetime, isn't that how Japan really got to be the superpower that they are? Wasn't it like in my childhood, everything was made in Japan, and
Yes.
and we fought that pretty hard, right? Look for the Union label, made in the USA. These
Yes.
were strong television campaigns when I was a child, to sort of combat that. And then, made in Taiwan. That's how Taiwan got,
Hmm.
a lot of. So, this isn't new, the manufacturing thing. It just sort of seems to sort of shift on to who it is and
Well,
at the moment.
it shifts to wherever cheap labor is.
Yeah.
Okay. And which is why we see so many vehicles today being produced in Mexico, because the
Yep.
cost of labor in Mexico is infinitely cheaper than the cost of labor in the United States or Canada or in Europe. And China's growth was that they undercut everybody when it came to the cost of manufacturing.
Yeah.
And you know, just about every major player out there gets their stuff made in China. It's just so much cheaper. Where would Apple be without the ability to have their products made in China?
Well, I mean, Apple has, was it $30 billion in cash? So I think they would still be okay if
Well,
they
I'm
paid a
sure they'd
little
be
bit
okay,
more for their products.
but my point is, it was the ability to have the stuff
Yeah.
inexpensively manufactured in the Far East, primarily China and I believe Taiwan, um, that allowed them to really grow their business. I mean, every major every major player in today's economy, the vast majority of them do not produce their goods here in the United States. They are produced outside of the United States and brought back in. Um, so, is it? How is it? I guess the question would certainly become: how is it that we can become competitive again in manufacturing, that we would bring manufacturing back to this country, or what type of tariffs or taxes would we have to impose on the goods that are manufactured outside of this country for sale inside this country? What type of taxes would we have to put on those so that it no longer is an advantage to have it manufactured outside of the country?
Well, so, and Igor says USA is no longer a producer but a consumer. And
Yeah, and we have been for years.
I will push back a little bit on, we don't produce manufactured goods. We are still the tech leaders. Um, we're
Are
still the
we?
innovation leaders. So there's a lot of that, and that's why I look at the most
It,
valuable companies on earth are
yeah.
all from America, but they're all tech companies. So
But
we've sort of switched our economy, is more than like we just gave it up.
yeah, well, we don't manufacture. I mean, Igor's right. We don't produce. We consume. And are we really the tech leaders? I mean, when everything's all said and done, how much money is China going to invest in technology, so that uh, they can be the tech leaders in the world? Well, I believe that they're doing some work outside of a justice's apartment or something, and it's a tad bit noisy.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But,
It's not a chainsaw. It's, of course, the leaf blower that
uh,
Elon Musk promised 2 years ago he would electrify and make silent. Um,
has that happened yet?
no, of course not.
Okay. Okay.
He said he would do it by the end of that year. So I think we still got like a decade or so
Yes.
because it's Elon time. Um, but sorry
Uh,
about that. Yeah,
it's
well,
it's
of course.
it's cyber. Is that like it's Cybertruck time?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's a race now. Will I see a Cybertruck or an electric leaf blower that's silent
Yeah.
first? But
Um,
sorry about that, folks. Yeah, of course, that's when the landscapers. I live next door to the park,
okay.
so they're at the park doing that. And they always have to start right next to my window, of course.
Well,
Yeah, so
just
it is what it is.
give them a different timeline in which to do it. Tell them you're busy Tuesdays,
Yeah,
Wednesdays, and Fridays at this hour.
yeah. I'll be sure to, and I'm sure they'll listen as well as the window washers listen to as that.
Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah,
they won't be listening at all.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah. But
But
what
I
what
think production is just shifted. You're saying we don't produce. I say we produce, but we're not producing physical. We're producing intellectual. We're producing technology. We're producing social media, for better or worse. Although it seems that China has jumped on that bandwagon as well.
yeah, they have a thing called TikTok, don't they?
Yeah, which
Okay.
seems to be outpacing all of our other social media. Um, and the information that they gather is frightening. If you haven't watched the congressional hearings about
Yes.
it and really paid attention to all the information that they gather when you just download the app, forget about using it,
Well,
just download.
thank goodness I've never
uh,
downloaded the app.
yeah, just
Yeah.
have it on your phone and it's crazy. So I mean, I think some of it is a shift in there, and certainly manufacturing. We still export more um, raw food sources than anybody else, so we have that.
Yeah, but
Although
what
that's
is
dying.
what is our imbalance when it comes to export versus import? I believe we import considerably more goods than we export, dollars and cents wise.
Yeah,
Um,
there's definitely yeah, of course.
yeah.
Um, and then and various administrations have had various takes and tacts on that, and what to do. And I don't know that, I think we all have our political opinions and stuff, but if I look objectively, one side or the other, I don't know that anybody's done a great job about balancing that, or even that necessarily everyone wants it balanced, or when we try, there's sort of unintended consequences or unforeseen, maybe for people who just want to go rush in and do things. Um, so I don't know where that goes, and I personally I think we've probably moved on as a society too far to go back to manufacturing. But I mean,
Well,
I could be wrong. Although I will put this out there: look at the bills in Alabama, Mississippi. There's a third state I can't remember. I have to look it up. That are now proposing laws of minors don't have to have work permits. Minors can work in more manufacturing plants because they can't find jobs. And we're talking minors now as young as 12.
wow.
These bills are passing in state houses or being proposed. I don't think any of them have been passed yet, but they're being proposed in state houses all across the country because they can't find the workers.
So is that how you get cheap labor?
Well, and that's my question is, are we competing with China on, okay, we're going to use child labor? Is that what we're like? I feel like morally, most of us have a problem making that leap and going into, well, yeah, okay, we want manufacturing, but that's not how we do it. And to one of our commenters earlier who said it, unions used to make up 90% of the workforce and now they make up 30. So there's been a lot of shifts in
Mhm.
that. And how do we correct that? Is correcting it the right way, or should we embrace the new and figure out how to go from there?
I don't know, but let's think about this as it relates to EVs. Um, we keep hearing all the time about BYD. Is that the one in China?
BYD and Neo, yeah.
Yeah. W- What what are the odds that at some point the taxes to import Chinese EVs to the United States are so high that it wouldn't make economic sense for China to A, import them, and B, for Americans to buy them because they would no longer have the supposed price advantage that they are expected to have. I mean, if if and I don't know the politics of this. I don't understand how this all works. But if the fear is that China combining with Russia could create economic stress, then don't allow them to sell their products here. Don't allow them to import their and I know we're supposed to be a free market country, but limit the amount of vehicles that they could actually export to the United States so that it would make them more expensive than comparable um, Japanese, Korean, or American made EVs.
Well, so
Does that make sense?
yeah, I mean, we're free market country, but we we don't have free trade with everyone, right? It's a complicated issue.
Yes.
To that, the last administration, yeah, tried to put tariffs on them. This administration is giving incentives, but not to the same countries that the last administration tried to put tariffs on. So I think, no matter what side of the aisle you're on, no matter what your political opinion, there seems to be sort of a through thread in our policies as far as that goes. And my question is this: I'm just going to throw it out there because when I was doing real estate, and I still follow it, there is some interesting thoughts and talks out there because we have a lot of foreign owned in real estate. California especially has
Mhm.
China is our number one investor in real estate here.
Wow.
So if we going to the EV thing, so if we buy their EV vehicles, BYD and Neo, we should definitely talk about some of the Neo advancements here in a moment. But if we're buying all their vehicles with the Russian minerals, is there a point to where it doesn't make economic sense for them to hurt the USA because we're their number one consumer? And you would not want to go after their number one consumer.
I don't know.
I
This.
mean, I think that's a tough question. And I've had many hours of discussions on this with people in the real estate field of, look, if they're owning all this, well, they're not going to just come in then, right? They're not going to invade and destroy the country because their economy depends on us, like Japan.
Yes.
Like Japan wouldn't become our enemy all of a sudden because their economy would collapse. So is there some of that that could go into this? Is this just too far fetched? What are your thoughts on that idea?
My thoughts are I'm just a dumb car guy. Okay. And I am smart enough to realize that I don't understand um, world economic conditions to the point that how doing one thing here could impact another country and how that ultimately could then impact us. There could be this giant ass vicious circle where it just comes back to bite you. I don't understand world economics enough to really offer an opinion or a thought on that. I've just thought over the course of time, that we keep hearing that, well, eventually the Chinese are going to want to bring their inexpensive EVs to the United States, and that will solve our problem of being able to have inexpensive EVs for Americans. And I think to myself, and if they do that, then they're undercutting all those automobile manufacturers that have been in the United States for years and years and years and years, um, and might drive some of them out of business. So is that really in the best interest of the country to do that? But then again, if we refuse to allow them to sell their vehicles here, will they suddenly raise the prices of what it takes to manufacture things there? Are there other ways that they could retaliate against us, um, and U.S. companies? So I mean, I don't understand. I I would probably have to have a conversation with my son-in-law Zach, who works at the State Department, to get some input so I can have a better idea as to how all this ties in together, when we
Yeah.
come up when we try to come up with policies. Because I know I'm not smart enough to understand, and I barely understand the car business. But when I say that, I understand it better than most people. Um,
Well, so to your point and to Igor's, I didn't say the U.S. is.
yeah,
I said we could import and become the
yes,
biggest, because this is the problem, right? If we don't import, then the EU and other countries just keep building bigger, bigger, bigger. Don't forget, India is a gigantic market that's just still emerging. And and all these countries, all these other powers get bigger and bigger, and they need the U.S. less and less and less. Um, that is a problem. So I'm saying, we could do that, but also with the concept of flooding the American market with the cheap Chinese EVs.
yes,
I have pointed this out before, and I'll point it out again. They're not cheap. They're the same price as a Tesla. In China, they're the
yeah.
same price as a Tesla. So there is no cheap, affordable Chinese EV. That doesn't actually exist. They're the same. They're on comparison with what we already have. Now, are they the the super expensive, Lucid and Rivian? No, but they are on par with Tesla. So like I don't see that. And then I see some things like Neo. Let's talk about Neo here
Mhm.
for a minute. They just started the trial on the high speed battery swapping stations,
Yes.
which we've talked about a few times, and I have all kinds of questions on how that works. But it's taking under 3 minutes, and they're finding a lot of success in it right now with their trials, and they're going to expand it more and more. Like,
Mhm.
and the U.S. is sort of like, well, like I was like, nah, that doesn't make any sense. We're not going to do it. We tried it, and then we sort of abandoned it and walked away from it. Is it's those kind of innovations I go, okay, is that sort of a future that China's working on? And because their government invests, they don't require private industry only and the government to stay out of it, because the government puts so much into this and they're investing. Do they get to leapfrog in some of this stuff? Plus, China doesn't have the intellectual property concepts that we do. They believe everything is collective and they build upon each other. So when Tesla opens up there, well, there's a reason why BYD looks a lot like a Tesla, right? Because they just build on top of
Mhm.
what everyone has done. That's the framework and thinking of there, instead of like, no, you can't use this one part and you can't use this. So are we in danger there of Neo, BYD, other Chinese companies leapfrogging because they're building on each other's technology with the backing of the government to make these experiments happen, where we're sort of hamstrung in our approach of private business only, private investment, and you better start making money for me the day before I invested.
I
I
this is
mean, this is all theoretical. Like I'm asking questions that honestly I don't know. Like
yeah.
they're real questions that I'm just like I think about and I try to parse, and I'm not the smartest guy in the world, so I don't know.
We need to get an economist on the show.
We do.
We I
I,
be I because
we have some people in the chat here who who definitely seem to know
Yes.
definitely more than I do.
Well, and
So
certainly
yeah,
more than I do. I mean, I I know enough to be dangerous, okay? In that I don't know enough to know enough. Or let's say I know enough to know that I don't know enough. But yet I usually allow myself to form an opinion without actually knowing enough. And in this particular case, I am trying my best to say I don't really know. I don't. I can sit here as a grown man and say I don't understand how all this plays out. I you know I don't. I don't understand the interplay between all these countries, all these economies, um, and how that all works to be able to have a real opinion. And so I'm man enough to admit that. But that doesn't provide any clarity for anybody. But I don't know.
yeah.
I just don't know. I am baffled.
And I go to it too, and I think this comment is perfect in my tearing of my thoughts. What's more efficient, NASA or SpaceX? SpaceX obviously far more efficient, figured out a lot of things that NASA couldn't, but built on what NASA did.
Yes.
So and I go to this all the time too about the government versus the private model is maybe China's government approach leapfrogs you to a certain point and then it gets stuck. And that's where we use the private model where maybe it takes a little bit longer, but in the end, goes a lot farther. NASA created a lot of stuff. I mean, the Starbucks cup you have came from NASA technology originally, right? Like it was all sort of built out of there. So
Hmm.
I never discount NASA and their achievements and what they did, even though SpaceX now, of course, outpaces everybody in the world in that space so far. Um, so I mean, it's this really complex issue, and maybe it's the partnership that keeps us successful. But how does that go with EVs? That's where I get into these government subsidies and charging networks that you can go, wow, we don't, the government should be involved. They shouldn't be in that. But yet, this is clearly the way the entire planet is going. I know there are people on your last show, Ray, who think EVs are a fad. I hear that all the time. I okay. I don't really fully understand that. I don't know how you think this many countries and this many companies are putting this much money into something and it's a fad. I mean, it's not
You
the
know,
pet rock,
yeah, I
right?
was going to say
It's the internet.
the pet rock was a fad.
Yeah.
I don't think EVs are a fad. But I'm also not convinced that ultimately, and when I say ultimately, it could be 100 years from now. Um, I'm not convinced that ultimately EVs will be the main source of energy for vehicles in the future. I Now for the foreseeable future, I think they are, but I don't know what the next frontier will be that somebody will say, "Oh no, we can do it with this or that." So it's
There's
like,
definitely some Moore's law
well,
involved in that. Yeah.
think about automobiles. Somebody back then must have said, "Oh, these damn things are just going to be a fad. These gas-powered vehicles are just going to be a fad." Okay, and well, yeah, they gas-powered vehicles have been a fad for like the last 130 years.
Yeah.
Okay, that doesn't
It's
mean that the EV fad won't last just as long before something comes out to replace the energy source, and it's no longer battery electric. It'll be something. Who knows? I mean, so yeah, in a sense, it could be a fad. It could just be
yeah.
like 100-year fad.
I mean, we've heard that. I've heard that my whole life about lots of stuff. I
Yeah.
remember the biggest one, other than the internet. Remember Jim Cramer The internet's a fad; it'll die in 10 years. Um, but the smartphone,
Yeah.
right? The smartphone is a fad. Nobody's going to want that. Nobody needs all that. You're just going to have this little, like, that's a fad. And I will grant that it probably is a fad. In 20 years, we probably won't have anything that looks like the smartphone anymore. Um, but, that would make it a 40-year fad.
Yeah.
I don't know about. But to your point, like, yeah, EVs, are they a fad? Well, we will probably figure out a better technology
Yes.
at some point. And with Moore's law, it's not going to take us 100 years, right? It'll take us much less time to figure that out. However, as I always say, there's a lot of money going into lithium mining right now, and those people want their money back,
Yeah.
and they want a good profit.
Yeah, but
So,
it doesn't mean they're going to get it.
but
There are.
I think there will be some limitations on how fast we grow, with people going, wait, hold on, I need my money and I need some profit out of this before we move on to the next thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, there've been a lot of investments over time that haven't quite panned out, that people bet big on. So yeah, there's money in lithium mining, but some of those players may never see the return on their investments. It just happens that way. They guess wrong, they bet wrong. It's always happened. My suspicion is it always will.
Yeah, I mean, people are always going to lose money. That's for sure.
They're going to bet on the wrong thing.
Yeah.
People can still bet hundreds of millions of dollars or billions of dollars on something, and it still could turn out to be the wrong bet. I mean,
That's
it just
true.
happens. Yeah.
Like if you were betting on basketball and you had bet on, say, the Phoenix Suns instead of the Sacramento Kings, which would have made sense at one
In years
point.
past. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Might not
Just-
make
just
sense
for
this
example.
year. Yeah. Yeah. No, I get it. I get it.
I get to have my say, like, once every 2 decades. So
Yeah.
I get my say today.
Oh, don't worry. I lived through like 8 or 9 years where the Suns were just pathetic. And, they did end up with the number 1 pick in the draft one year. And you have to be really bad in order for that to happen. So, yeah.
It's true. Yeah. Last time we were in the playoffs, the opposing team paid off the refs. So we're sort of watching a little closer. True story. Anyone who doesn't know that story, go look it up. Everyone admitted it. The pennant stayed. The title stayed. I kind of go, all of us in Sacramento go, wait, but the ref and the team all admitted this. And what? So whatever.
It is what it is. Yeah. Do you know what time it is?
It is time for you to have lunch. It is time for me to go back to work and help more members save money on their next car. That's what time it is.
Well, I think you should take at least a few-minute break before you do that.
Alas, we have other coaches leaving, so I got to jump on.
Okay. Well, then enjoy your non-break.
Yep.
Thank you for the conversation today, and we'll be back here tomorrow, won't we?
We will be back here tomorrow with something.
Okay.
We'll figure out what. We kind of had a wrench thrown in it this morning, but we'll figure out. We'll always have a nice discussion.
Well, you keep me informed as to what it is. You can be like Zach. You can let me know a moment before.
Okay. I'll let you know at least 20 seconds before we go on air tomorrow.
I appreciate that. I appreciate that.
All right. Bye, everybody.
See you, everybody. Thanks for being here today.